Get started. A reminder of what this series today should be the last for a four-part series on running your personal finances in a biblical way. And today I'll focus on the last chapter of the personal finances, which is fun, which is once you've done all the other homework, whatever's left over you can have fun with. But also I want to talk a little bit about job searching, because the beginning of the lesson was income. You need income to be able to give back to God, and if you don't work and don't have a job, you can't do that. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and may not get through all of it, but certainly would invite people that are in the job market, thinking about trying to get a job, updating their resume, those kinds of things. I'm happy to spend some time offline with folks. A reminder, disclaimer, I'm not a financial advisor, so what I say does not necessarily have all the latest updates from the tax code. Past performance is not a guarantee of future performance, but hopefully it gets you to go search things, go talk to a tax advisor or a financial advisor, and start asking questions about how do you manage your own personal finances in a biblical way. So if you remember the chapters that we went through, started with income, so having a job or a pension or retirement, but basically money coming in, and that is biblical, to work and to have income. And the first thing to do is to tithe, right, to give back to God. And hopefully all of you have taken that to heart with my encouragements of looking at how much are you giving, dollar-wise, percentage-wise, doing it pre-tax, tithing on bonuses, salary increases, inheritances, whatever, the sale of a property. I hope all of you have taken that to heart and have prayed about it, and hopefully have sharpened your pencil on how much more can I give sacrificially and joyfully back to the church. So I'll check with Brenda how how things have evolved over the last 4 weeks, but that's the most important thing, ultimately, of this whole lesson, is giving back to God. We talked about expenses and how to make sure you manage kind of the incompressible expenses, the things you have to pay for, like rent and food, getting rid of bad debt. There's such a thing as good debt, but getting rid of bad debt, taxes, which we have to pay, but you're encouraged to minimize those. Savings, so having rainy day funds, having money for retirement, which is probably the most important thing in the long term. And then today we're going to talk about kind of what's left over at the end, the fun part. So we are here to also enjoy the fruits of our labor, and if you have a healthy financial life, it does remove a lot of stress from being able to enjoy the money that you make. One of the greatest joys is giving back, and whether that's giving back to the church through tithing, giving back to family, friends, preferably not to the IRS or give them the bare minimum, but it's better to try and give to people you care about and give the absolute minimum legally to the IRS. But that's probably one of the greatest joys and sources of, I call it fun, is to be able to give back, and give back generously and joyfully. Being able to plan for a big vacation or a big purchase, that delayed gratification, buying a new car, getting a house, something like that, a graduation present for a kid. That's one of the greatest joys, is when you don't get it immediately, you get it later, and it feels so much better. And that's what you do with what's left over once you've managed your finances. Making sure you continue to live within your means. Just because you have leftover money doesn't mean go to Las Vegas, start gambling, doesn't mean go out and splurge. Don't accumulate bad debt, right? There's good debt, but don't all of a sudden say, ooh, I've got extra money, I can go put it on the credit card. That's usually when it spirals out of control. So being very disciplined about living within your means and putting that money aside and planning for the future. And I would encourage, for those of you who are married, this is kind of a team sport. This is not just for the head of the household, although that is where the lead should come from biblically, but plan financially with your spouse, because you're both in it, and at some point, one of the two will unfortunately pass away, and the other one will be left to manage. And if they don't know how the finances work, where the money is, where the savings are, that's probably not a very biblical way of approaching the survival of a single spouse. So to that end, it's a partnership. And I think Proverbs 31, everyone knows the 1031, the wife of noble character, but it does talk about involving the spouse in the business of the household. And that is very biblical. She is more precious than jewels. She is a good wife. She is a homemaker. She is wise. She is charitable. She is prepared for the future. She outfits her home and herself in fine linen. She has a husband who is well known and respected. For me, these are all principles of jointly planning, running the household, running the checking account, basically planning financially together with your spouse. is something I think is very important, particularly if you pass away suddenly. You don't want to leave them in a lurch and they don't know where the accounts are, what the account numbers are, and all of a sudden they have the mortgage to pay, et cetera, especially if you're the main breadwinner. How do you take care of your spouse after you pass away? So, want to switch into what I call kind of the budgeting and administrative stuff, but this is probably the homework, other than tithing, which hopefully you've all, as I mentioned earlier, sharpened your pencils. Making sure that you take care of business. There's kind of the business of running your home. Having a plan. If you haven't developed a budget, since I started this lesson, you have another 2 months before the end of the year to develop a budget for 2026. So do that. Find out where did you spend money, where did it go, where were the expenses, what was your income, what did you pay on taxes, what did you tithe, and plan for 2026. Take a spreadsheet or a piece of paper. There are some programs like Quicken that help you do that. But have a plan. Without a plan in 2026, your financials will be kind of a mess. And I think the encouragement that I'd like to give you is make 2026 the first year of true financial discipline with a plan, so that you know month in and month out, are you on track, off track, know where your money is going, know where your savings are headed. And if you don't have a budget, or if you don't know how to start a budget, come and talk to me. I've done that for ourselves, I've done that with our boys. And it's a pretty quick exercise to take a spreadsheet and just look at where did you spend money on cell phone and internet and car and insurance and all these things, and just track them and say, okay, wow, I didn't realize I was spending 10% of my income on this thing. And then having the discipline to say, well, now moving forward for the month by month, this is what I can afford to, or what I should be spending. And remember that 50, 30-20. So you've got the needs, things like rent or mortgage, food, gas, car payment, things like that. Then you've got the wants, and then you've got the savings. And if you don't have kind of that math working out, you have no savings. So you have to make sure that where you spend the majority of your money still leaves some left over to put into retirement accounts, into savings, a 529 for college. So here again, that's what a budget allows you to do. Without a budget, you don't know if you have any savings. So knowing ahead of time that you can work out a budget where you're putting 20% of your money towards retirement, towards paying down debt, important things, that's part of the visibility you want to have into your own financials. Now, these aren't like strict numbers, but it's kind of order of magnitude. You probably are spending 50% of your money on those basic needs. Shelter, food, things like that, healthcare. So if you have more than 50% being kind of burned through, that's where you're going to start dipping into those fun things. That's where you need to do the math on your budget. Where should my money be spent? Where should it be going? And squeeze those wants, things that you'd like to do but aren't necessary, so that you free up some money to save. That's probably the biggest risk, is letting things creep in, the spending happen, and then you're left, whatever's left over is what I'll save. No, you should probably earmark, here's what I'm going to save, and I'll deal with whatever little is left over to have the fun. That's the discipline to have, is prioritize savings, and as we talked about last time, compounding, so putting money away now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, or in Kai's case, 40, 50 years from now. That's what you want. You want that discipline now to put the money to work for the long term, and not necessarily spend it in kind of short-term gratification. This may sound a little administrative, but I think it's an important thing too, is get your paperwork in order for your own sake, but also for your spouse and for your children when they inherit. So keep all your records, preferably in PDF format. So papers, they can burn, they can get flooded, you won't know where they are. I encourage you, download statements, download all this stuff in PDF format on a computer, and have a backup in the cloud or somewhere else. If your house goes up in smoke and that's where all the files were, you have no trace whatsoever of your accounts, your retirement, et cetera, et cetera. So have the discipline to track everything, preferably electronically, and then have it backed up somewhere. Make sure you have everything renewed. So put it on the calendar, whether it's your driver's license, your passport, all these things, where's your social security number, all these important pieces of personal information, have them encrypted, but have them ready to go. and have them preferably on your phone in the cloud. You can encrypt things, you can put them behind a password protected, like a hidden photo album, but have all of this. Because if it's scattered all over the place, the day you need it, the day there's a disaster and you have to prove who you are, or prove that you had this property, or that you die and your spouse has to find all this stuff, or both of you die and the kids have to figure out how do we deal with inheritance, it's a mess. And I speak, firsthand experience. My dad, when he passed away 4 years ago, his stuff was all paper, and it was all over the map. It was a nightmare to track down stuff, and my sister and I had to kind of flip through piles and piles and reams of paperwork, and you discover a bunch of stuff that should have been put in order much, much earlier. So for the sake of your kids, so they don't have to deal with it, plan and prepare to make it easier for them. Expiration dates on passports, driver's licenses. Put all this stuff on your calendars and give yourself a 6-month notice. Because a passport can take 2 weeks, it can take 3 months. If the government's shut down like it is now, you probably can't get a passport. And if you need it to leave the country and travel, or if your driver's license expires, put it on your calendar, 6 months, 3 months, put reminders to go get this stuff done. Same thing with any other life insurance, things like that, or car lease that's up. Make sure you just have those personal kind of paperwork and bureaucracy stuff properly documented. Get all of your statements, bank statements, credit card statements, car lease statements, get everything in e-format. So they send you a PDF and then put them in a file. So you don't have the paperwork just sitting around, I'll just throw it on the desk, and then you have a pile like this. Make sure you get electronic versions of everything. Passwords. They say don't write them down. Well, I say write them down, but in an encrypted file somewhere, and the kids or the spouse know how to access it. Because that's another nightmare when somebody passes away or there's an emergency, who has the passwords to every account? The retirement account, the bank account, what are the PIN numbers? And keep that up to date, and then save it and encrypt it or hide it on a computer. But let your spouse, let your kids know where is that kind of survival folder. And don't be unencrypted on your desktop, on your computer. That's not good. But make sure that in case of emergency, that stuff is there. Because there's nothing worse than trying to fish that out and figure it out, and then you have to deal with calling the banks and saying, well, I have to produce a death certificate. I have to prove that they're dead, and then you have to give me access to the account. It takes forever. You want instant access to everything. Another thing to keep track of is what's called your credit score or FICO score. There are different agencies that do this. Usually your bank will offer that as a free service. When you go and log into your bank, they'll say, oh, here's your credit score. That's another good thing to monitor. First of all, it's healthy to have a good credit score because you get better rates for mortgages and all these other things. But also make sure that somebody hasn't stolen your identity. So if all of a sudden somebody goes off on a spending spree with your identity, usually your credit score will take a ding. So something to monitor and something to improve over time. When you pay back your credit cards, when you pay back debt, it builds your credit score. And especially early in life, so here again, Kai, you want to build credit by having debt that you pay back. And that's usually the best way to improve your credit score. Missing a payment, missing a mortgage payment, missing a car payment, that hurts. Having too many credit cards, that hurts. So it's kind of a balance, but you want to have a good credit score because that gives you the best rates possible when you do have to buy that car, do have to get a mortgage. And it's just something to keep an eye on and look at, maybe not every single week, but once a month, every 3 months, go check out your credit score. In terms of the cards that you use, use debit cards or credit cards that you can track electronically. So you can download them, you can get e-statements. If you actually use a program like Quicken or Monarch, these are different online programs, they can download all your transactions. Makes it a lot easier when you have to track how is my monthly spending, how's my budget going. So get cards that have that link to a software program. Debit cards are probably the best because it's like cash. Comes out of your account immediately, so there's no interest, there's no debt accumulated. If you have a credit card, because you want, the airline miles or something like that, great, pay it off every month. Do not incur any credit card debt. First of all, it dings your credit score. Secondly, that's money thrown out at 26% or whatever the interest rate is. Make sure you're disciplined to use cards and that they're taken out of your account automatically. So you incur zero cost, you get all the miles you want or whatever the benefit is of those cards, but make sure you're paying it automatically every single month. Don't skip a month and tighten the belts, figure out a way to get rid of any credit card debt and then never incur that again. I don't know if all of you know of these programs. Quicken is probably the most famous software program to run personal finance. I've been using it for 25, almost 30 years it's been around. There's some very simple versions. There's another one called Monarch, and they have iPhone apps and computer apps to help you to set up your budget. And it'll link in with your checking account, it'll link in with your credit cards, it'll link in with all your retirement accounts or savings accounts, and literally you press the button and everything gets updated every single day. It might take a little bit of time to set it up, but once you've done it, you'll be grateful because you don't have to track paper anymore. You know every single morning where are my accounts, and you can spot stuff, say, ooh, I didn't know, that's a weird transaction, what was that? Versus waiting for the statement at the end of the month. So go explore these programs. Some of them are free-ish, but usually they're not that expensive, but it's a great investment. Get it set up and then run that for the rest of your life, and here again, do it together as a couple. If you get a salary every 2 weeks or every month, get it direct deposited. In other words, it goes straight from your employer into your bank account. Don't get a check at home, that you have to go to the bank, etc. Direct deposit. And you can set that up with your employer, but make sure that that money shows up automatically. Auto tithing. So talk to Brenda, how do you set up with PayPal or other sources, how does you automatically have it just come out of your account and get sent to the church? So you don't have to think about it. You want to update it regularly, but you don't want to have to come to church and say, oh, I forgot to tithe. Just automate God's giving back to God, and that should be one of those no-brainers. Same thing with all of the accounts we talked about, IRA, 401k, 529, unified gift to minors, all these things have it automatically withdraw from your bank account. So go to Vanguard or Fidelity or Charles Schwab, or whichever account you have, and say, every month I want you to take out $250 from this account and put it in my IRA, $250, put it in. Just set it up automatically and fire and forget. And maybe in January you update it because the IRS has updated the limits for the next year for IRAs or 401ks. Fine, do it in January, early January, but then set it for the rest of the year. And you will not see that money. It'll show up through a direct deposit from your employer, and it'll leave immediately for your savings accounts. That's the best kind of money that you save, is that you don't even see it come through your hands, and you therefore won't spend it. If it depends on you to go and wire the money or write a check and send it in, it won't happen. You will skip a payment. You'll say, oh, this month, I kind of don't want to do it. Automate everything. And only in case of emergency do you turn off the auto stuff. But that for me is one of the best things. You set it up for the next 20, 30 years, 15 years, whatever. It will accumulate without any effort on your part. So spend the time to go auto deposit absolutely everything. Same thing with your credit cards, auto pay them. So you don't have to, if you're traveling and the credit card bill comes in and you're not there, you miss a payment, not good. Same thing with your mortgage, same thing with your rent. Just have everything auto pay as much as possible to simplify life administration, so you don't have to think about it. Same thing if you do have debt, accumulated debt, whether it's student debt, credit card debt, automate the payback of that. Have a plan, say by the end of the year I'm going to pay down this much, and have it set up automatically. So here again, you don't skip a beat. You don't say, this month I don't want to do it. And be aggressive with paying down bad debt. That credit card stuff, if you have a couple $1,000s at 25% interest, pay it off as quickly as possible and automate that payback very quickly. You'll feel good about it. It might be a little short-term pain. Trust me, when you pay that off completely, you'll be filled with joy that you got rid of it. And it's just the right biblical thing to do, is get rid of bad debt. But set that up automatically as well. Don't leave things to your human impulses. Set it up automatically. That's the best thing you can do. And same thing with bills, cell phone bills, electricity bills, natural gas bills, all these bills, internet bills, just automate everything. Personal admin, you don't want to be wasting time on weekends, pulling out a bill, logging in, et cetera. Just have it automatically paid. Track these things, look at the statements, but automate absolutely everything. So that's the full list of everything. I think these are all been recorded, so you can go check them out. But if you want a copy of the slides, I'm happy to send them out. If you want to refer back to them or come and talk to me. But we've gone through kind of what I consider the full, profit and loss of the business of you, the business of your household, the business of you personal life, financials. This is essentially the stack that I encourage you to go through every single one of these at some point. And if you're married with your spouse, go through these and talk about them. plan for them, budget them, change something in how you're running your financials by going through this list in that order. Closing thoughts on this, and then we'll switch over to job search and resume stuff. Pray about your personal finances and refer to the Bible. There's countless quotes, but it is something to pray for. Not pray to be super rich, but pray that God gives you the wisdom and the means to give back, but also the wisdom to manage the gifts that you've been given. So pray about it. Work as a couple. Don't do it alone. This is something that every household should have the two wise adults looking at and aware of, and work on it. Money and financials is usually one of the largest contributors to divorce and to unhappy marriages. Do it together. And especially when times are tough, do it together. And work yourself out of credit card debt, get your savings going, get your retirement. Both of you are going to retire at some point, so you kind of want to do that jointly. Both of you are going to send kids to college, so you probably want a 529 plan. Both of you want to buy a car, go on that vacation, so do it together. And it's a lot less lonely. I don't say necessarily more fun, but it's at least you do it as a couple, and I encourage you to do that. Ask questions. I mean, Google, ChatGPT, all these things are wonderful resources online. Ask for advice, especially free advice. Or if you have a tax advisor, financial advisor, ask them. There are no dumb questions. There are no naive questions. Ask. Especially when tax laws change and you're not quite sure where to start or how do I plan for retirement, ask those questions. Time. If you have 5, 10, 15, 20, 40 years ahead of you, don't procrastinate. Start now. And if you are very close to retirement, you're 5 years away, hurry up. You have 5 years to try and catch up. And there are ways to catch up in terms of savings, where you place your money, but time is the one element that plays in your favor if you have a lot of it when it comes to personal finances. Do God's work. Use the gifts of finance, the gifts of income to give back to the church and to do God's work through charitable activities, through raising your kids as young Christians. This is God's plan for us, is to be good stewards of the money that He's given us. So think of it through that lens. And then finally, if any of this was, this long list of things that I went through over the last 4 sessions, come and talk to me. Several of you have already done that. I'm happy to spend time one-on-one or two-on-one. And I don't know all the answers, but I've learned a lot, and I can point you hopefully in the right direction. But I'd love to sit down with you and even go through, how do you set up a budget? Show me your retirement savings. Show me where you invested things, and I can give you some things to go explore. I won't give you, investment advice. I won't say buy, this stock or that stock. But I'll tell you, take it out of a checking account that's earning nothing and put it in the stock market. And there are some relatively safe investments that you can put out there that will work over time versus just leaving it sitting idle in a checking account, which is a waste of that money. And biblically, that is not a good investment. You're supposed to double or quintuple the money if you think of the parable of the talents. But do talk to me. Do come and talk to me. I know I travel a lot. I'm busy, so it may not be like instant, but I'm happy to spend time in person or over Zoom, go grab coffee, and we can talk about your personal financial plan. So that's the money part. I'm going to shift over and try and cover as much about job searching. And some of you either are thinking of transitioning, changing jobs. Some of you have retired, but maybe you want to go get a job just to stay busy. Some of you are about to start a career like Kai, and you have to think of this also through a biblical lens. And I've been very fortunate in my career. I've been able to do a lot of things, but I've also interviewed a lot. I've updated my resume. I've interviewed a lot of people. So here's some pointers that I have when it comes to job searching. First of all, biblically, remember that the gifts you've been given and the talents you have for whatever vocation you have, that comes from God. So don't give yourself too much credit. The skills you have to earn a living and to have a job, that is clearly God's doing. You need to be honest. If people lie about their resume, people lie about what they've done, or stretch the truth. You hear countless examples of people who lied on their resumes, pretended they had a diploma from wherever, they get caught. So this is not a place to get fancy and say, oh, I got an MBA from Harvard, when you don't even know where Harvard is. Stay truthful and grounded in what you've done, and you can be proud of what you've done, but don't stretch the truth to the point of lying, because you'll get caught. You will get rejected in the job world. You will interview and you will not get the job. You will try and get a job for a year and nothing happens. And you have to have trust in Christ that there is a plan. You have to put the effort in. You can't just sit back and hope the job shows up at your front door. But you will be rejected. But don't take that as a mark against you. It has nothing to do with you. That's God's plan is for you to find the right job that He has in plan for you. And rejection can be frustrating, can be demoralizing, and you can kind of say, it's the end of the world. God doesn't want me to find a job. No, He does. It just you have to put in the right effort and find the right vocation. Trusting that God has a plan versus playing the worldly game. Yes, we should find a job, but making sure that we find the right job and refusing jobs that would clearly compromise not only ethical, moral, but Christian principles. So certain jobs that are just non-starters, and making sure that you do not. I'll give you an example, and Jennifer remembers this. I was recruited. People wanted to hire me for, that vaping company called Juul, Juul. That become extremely addictive. They wanted me to come and run it. And they had all kinds of nicotine stuff and marijuana stuff, whatever. And this is like way back, like before the vaping stuff started. And I remember Jennifer and I talked about it. I was like, I can't do it, right? That just goes against my principles. And as a Christian, I can't, even though the money was going to be great, et cetera, and Juul had an incredible success. Now everybody's in jail. So I'm glad I didn't do it. But that is true. All the leaders there, they're all in jail and got sued, whatever. So doubly grateful that I did not go down that path. But I wouldn't go work for a cannabis company, right? And there's certain things you just don't do. And you are not defined by your job, right? Christ defines who you are. And your belief in Christ and belief in God and your faith in God defines who you are. The job is a means to an end. Yes, it's income. But if you get fired or if you have a bad boss or can't get a job, that doesn't define who you are. It can be, upsetting, but in the end, you are not your job, right? You need the job to make income, and hopefully you're good at your job and you enjoy your job, you have great colleagues, good boss, good money, but it doesn't define you. Particularly, I encourage, early career young adults, I encourage them to get fired early and have a bad boss early, right? Don't wait till you're 45, 55 to get fired for the first time. Get fired when you're 23. It'll sting, and then you'll rebound, and you'll be like, oh, well, that didn't hurt. And then you get used, you don't want to get used to getting fired, but you realize that doesn't define you. Having a bad boss teaches you two things: who you never want to be as a boss and who you never want to work for again. Get those lessons early in life, right? Christ defines you, the job doesn't. And you'll change, especially a generation like Kai's, you will change jobs 20 times throughout your career. Right? I changed a lot. Some people are lifers. They stay in the same company for 40 years. That's great. The younger generation will change job every 18 to 24 months. The job doesn't define you. So I want to cover the resume, or CV, curriculum vitae. One is Latin, one's French. What's called a cover letter. These days it's not actually a letter. Usually it's an email that goes with your resume. What I consider an interesting approach to job searching, so I call it like a direct marketing campaign. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about interviewing. And I don't know if I'll be able to get through all of this, but if anybody is in the job market thinking about updating their resume, happy to spend some time with you, or if you're about to go into an interview, talk to me, because I've done this a million times. I've interviewed people and I've been interviewed, and I have at least some pointers that I think could be helpful. So let's talk about the resume. The objective of a resume is not to tell your entire life story. Because first of all, that'd be too long. Secondly, nobody cares. That's not the point. The point of the resume is to get the call back. It's like advertising. The call to action is for you to say, oh, I'm going to go to the car dealer because I want that car. I'm going to go buy that perfume, or whatever. It's the call to action to do something. It's not to tell your entire life story. So you want that first call back or that first interview, and you want to avoid your resume going straight to the garbage can, physical or electronic. Because what do you think the average span of life for a resume is? How long does a resume last in somebody's hand, on their screen or physically in hand? 6 seconds. That's how quickly somebody disposes or takes action on a resume. So I put under 10, but the actual statistic is the resume lasts 6 seconds. You have to make an impression in 6 seconds. That's what advertising does, right? You flip through a magazine or you see a website with an ad, that's like a fraction of a second, and it has to work. So you have to think of your resume like an ad that has to make an impression and make somebody stop and say, ooh, I'm gonna take a different action than just say, hitting delete. And especially in kind of, when you are in business, for example, you get a lot of resumes sent your way. I just don't have time to look at them all. So I quickly scan and I'm delete, delete, delete. Ooh, that one pops, that one's kind of cool. But think of the resume, nobody will read it in its entirety. They just won't. What I do when I get a resume, probably do it in about 5 seconds. I look at the name. So do they have an interesting name? Like I can kind of tell what nationality or what country they're from. Current job, like what are they doing right now? What college did they go to? And do they have a funky hobby? Like, I don't know, skydiving, violin playing, something, And that's how I scan a resume. I don't look at the 5 other jobs they've done. I don't look at how many languages they speak, or don't put that thing that says reference upon request. That's completely useless. That's how I scan a resume, and I do it in about 5 seconds. And I determine, am I going to throw it away or do something with it? And most people that receive resumes do the same thing. They quickly scan it. And you essentially delete it or take an action, and you want to get rid of that thing within 30 seconds. So if I'm going to forward it to the head of HR, I'm going to respond and say, yes, let's meet. Or I'm going to respond and say, sorry, don't have a job, good luck. But that's done in a very short amount of time. So what you want is to try and influence that decision when somebody gets your resume. One thing people will do is they will go on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, hopefully, for those who are in the job market, you have a LinkedIn profile. That's the one social media I would encourage you to actually invest and spend time on. And people will go there and say, okay, I see the person's name, I'm gonna type it in LinkedIn, it's gonna pop up, and they're gonna see, hopefully, the same exact thing between your resume and LinkedIn. That's part of the advice, is make sure those two work. But they're gonna see, who do we know in common? Oh, they know Billy Bob. Okay, so I can call that person and get a reference. So make sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date, because that's the first place people will go. They get rid of the resume, they go to LinkedIn. Now that's become the electronic resume of preference. So some resume tips. 1 to 2 pages maximum. 2 if you've really done a lot in life, but if you're fresh out of high school or fresh out of college, you do not have 2 pages worth of a resume. Trust me, you have 1 page. So you don't want the 10-page, the 4-page. 1 to 2. 2 if you really have had a busy life and you like are late into your career and you have stuff to talk about. But don't stretch it, and I'll challenge anybody who gives me a resume, if it's more than 2 pages, especially if you're early in career, I'll say get it to 1. Compress it and get it to 1 page. Don't make stuff sound like you've done all this wonderful things when you haven't, right? And be thoughtful about what you include, what you don't include. Make sure it's the truth. Because people are going to check. They're going to call references. They're going to see, were you really the person who did this at this company? They're going to call that employer. Did this person work here? So people will do that. They'll do the reference checking. So make sure you aren't stretching the truth at all. When you talk, you can say, oh, I did this, did that, et cetera, but people are going to check. They're going to check on you. Like an ad, make your resume stand out. Because of that less than 6 seconds kind of survival time of a resume, it's got to pop like an ad, right? A good ad, you're like, ooh, that looks cool. Right? A bad ad, you're like, just you flip through the magazine or click right through it. If your resume is black and white, only uses Times Roman 14 font, it's boring. It's generic. Everyone has the same font. All these standard templates, for me, that's like the first thing, like boring. They didn't put any effort into it. A black and white ad with nothing but like copy, nothing but text, you're probably not gonna read the ad. It's not a very good ad. But an ad that has a cool picture and a simple word or something that gets your attention, you're gonna pay attention to the ad. Same thing with the resume. And I think I've got an example. Yeah, using color logos. If you go to LinkedIn, most companies, when you say I've worked at XYZ company, the company logo shows up on the side. I think your resume should look exactly the same, because that's what people expect. And by the way, when you look at a resume and you see company logos, ones you can recognize, you're like, oh, I know that company. Wow, that's cool. They worked at HP, they worked at Shell Oil, they worked at whatever company. So the logos the human brain interprets logos much faster than reading text. Plus they're color, most of them are color. So here again, it pops. Change fonts, don't go crazy like Zapftingbats or whatever, some of those crazy script fonts, but use a font that at least, looks different, right? And there are like hundreds and millions of fonts out there that you can pick in Word and whatever. Pick a font that at least looks different. And make sure it's the same consistent font. Don't change fonts in a resume. So make sure that at least it looks professional. Remove words. Don't write long paragraphs. Nobody reads them. You put bullet points and just a few key words that people are going to look at. Bullet points are easy. People can look at lists. If you have this long, drowning out paragraph, nobody reads that. They don't have time. They're scanning. With bullet points, they can say, ooh, I got 3 bullet points. I'm going to look at 1, 2, 3. Versus a 4-line paragraph. Nobody has time for that. Use a thesaurus. Find new words. Don't use the same word over 5 times. Just get a little sophisticated. And with Word, you can just right-click, and it'll pop up like 10 different words you can use. Don't use words you don't know. They'll say, what do you mean here? And you're like, well, I don't know. I don't know what I meant by that word because I don't even know what it means. So like, so don't go wild. But come up with better words than, good or, things like that. And assume that your resume is not paper, right? It's going to be digital. You're going to email it in. Now, if you go to the interview, you can bring a hard copy, but they probably have it on their iPad or their computer anyway. Maybe they've printed it out. You might want to bring a hard copy, but assume it will be consumed and viewed as a PDF, which allows you to be a little bit more creative, right? You can do some fun stuff with PDFs and formats and edges, et cetera, and you can use the full page, right? You have a lot more real estate to work on when you do it electronically. So anyway, think of it as an ad. You're advertising yourself. So that was my resume. Very small, but it was like 1, 2, 3, 4 pages. That was maybe, 25 years ago. My resume now is 1 page. And I keep it that way. Even when I add new jobs, I keep it that way. And it's got, logos. And I put logos for example, the schools I went to. You put the logo of the college, you put the logo of the languages you speak, you put the flag. Here again, it pops. And it just looks, it's more condensed. And the colors pop, and people say, oh, okay, he's worked at these companies. And if they want to know the detail of what did you do when you worked at XYZ company, that's what the interview's for. Right? Then you can go into the details, then you can tell a wonderful story about how you changed this, that, or the other, or what you accomplished, or the experience you got, or the wisdom you got from that job. That's part of the interview. But writing all that in there nobody's going to read it. So I'll just click through. There's a whole bunch of things here that I'm probably more about formatting. That I'm happy to take anybody's resume and kind of rip it apart and say, redo this, redo that, condense it down to 1 page or 2 pages. I have at least what I think are things that make a resume stand out. So if you want me to look at a resume, or if you've never written a resume, I don't know, Kai, do you have a resume? Not yet? We'll get you one. But I think it's important. And it's something you want to keep updated. All too often I hear, I haven't updated my resume in 3 years, or 5 years, or whenever. Every time you have a job change or something new happens, update the resume. It takes you 10 minutes. Keep the resume up to date. Because if a recruiter calls or somebody says, hey, you're coming in for an interview, it's like, ooh, I don't have my resume updated. You want your resume updated, always. And it's kind of a quick 10-minute maintenance every 6 months, whenever you get a new job or whenever there's something interesting that's different in your life. Put it in there. One of the things that I do put in there, and I think it's biblical, is to put in my involvement in church. The churches that I've been a member of, or where I've been, like our church in New York, where I'm still the treasurer, don't be ashamed of that. Because that'll lead to a conversation. Say, oh, you're active in your church. Yes, I am. If they have a problem with that, it's probably not the company you want to go work for, right? But I think that's, in my opinion, if you're involved in youth ministry, some charitable organization, et cetera, I would put it out there in your kind of hobbies and extracurricular activities so people know that you're a Christian. And either that sparks a conversation because they are Christian themselves and they're like, oh, which church do you go to, what denomination, et cetera, or they're atheists, but they're intrigued. They're like, oh, tell me more about your religion. Here again, it may not lead to a job, but that's evangelizing. And so I think the resume, in my opinion, I'd love to hear, maybe Pastor Frank thinks that's it's heretical, but I think showing your faith in your resume is not something to be ashamed of. I mean, you don't want to make the whole resume about evangelism, although maybe it's an opportunity, convert them to Christ and don't get the job, but that's a good trade-off. The last thing here, don't put references upon request, et cetera. They know that. if they want a reference, if you get down the interview thing, they'll ask you for references. But putting that references upon request, that's a useless kind of throwaway sentence. So take that out, takes up space on the resume anyway. Make sure your LinkedIn profile matches 100%. The dates, the companies, the job, because people are going to go there. And if they see a discrepancy, there's something in your resume that's not on LinkedIn, or something on LinkedIn that's not on your resume, like, well, this person is inconsistent. Those two have to match perfectly. And if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, get one. If you're actively looking for a job and you want to maintain LinkedIn, the minute you change jobs or something new happened, you get a promotion, you go change LinkedIn the day of. And then maybe you send a little thing out saying, oh, I just got promoted, or I'm delighted to announce that I started a new job at XYZ company, and your network will know about it, recruiters will know about it. So use that as part of the propagating the advertising of your resume. Make sure you don't have spelling mistakes, right? That's the worst thing. If there's a spelling or grammatical mistake, it's like, come on, have somebody else read it. Word can certainly find most spelling mistakes. But don't, and sometimes Word won't, like if it's there, well, there are multiple ways of spelling there, depending on where it is grammatically, just double check. There's nothing worse than a spelling mistake, a grammatical mistake, or I'd say even punctuation or formatting. The font's different, the bullets are different, like clean it up, because it is a reflection of who you are. And just like an ad is supposed to be perfect, your resume should be perfect. Do it in Word or whatever other word processor, but almost everybody does it in Word, and then you print it as a PDF and you have like your resume ready to go in a single file, and then you can email that out. Update it all the time. So that's the resume. So hopefully helpful for those of you who want to start a job search or haven't even started their career yet, but get a resume going. Or if you're retired and you want to get back to the job world, great. Update your resume, get a new resume. I'm ready to go. The cover letter is usually the email that goes with it. It used to be old school, like an actual letter, and in France, you'd have to handwrite that. You'd handwrite the cover letter because they would do graphology tests and analyze your handwriting to figure out kind of what kind of a person you were. Somewhat illegal, I think, in the US, but now people just email, right? But you send a short and sweet email that says, please find my resume, my CV attached. You'll see, the objective of that cover letter is for them to open the resume. Think of the email is not to tell your whole life story or to repeat the resume, because that's why the resume is there. The goal of the email is for them to not hit delete, for them to say, oh, this person's looking for a job, or wow, they've got an interesting current job, and they attached a resume, I'll open it. If you make it 5 paragraphs long, too dense, and it's repeating exactly what's in the resume, what will they do? They will delete it, because that cover letter lasts about the same 6 seconds. You want to be straight to the point. I'm looking for a job, here's my resume, call me. A little too simplistic, but it's essentially, that's the essence of a cover letter. 1 paragraph, maybe 2, and the call to action is, look at my resume, call me, or I will call you, or I'm applying for this job, but keep it really short and sweet. You can pretty much just change the opening line to, oh, hi, Mr. Jones, I'm connected to your company through this and that person, and then the rest is boilerplate, right? Don't spend time customizing the cover letter, other than maybe that first line, because they're going to delete the cover letter anyway. So keep it as simple, so where you can produce more emails a lot faster. Don't tweak your resume, don't tweak the cover letter. It should be as generic, as standard as possible, so you can send out a lot of them without wasting time on, I'm going to change my resume for this job. Don't do that. Just keep it very simple and standard. And sometimes the hook is, who introduced you to this company? How are you connected to this person? How do you, why are you calling them specifically? I'll give you an example. Matthew, our older son, went to a university called Tufts, just outside of Boston. And the CEO of Chase Bank, which is the biggest bank in the world, is a Tufts alumni, Jamie Dimon. And Matthew sent him an email. He tried to figure out what his email was. He got it. He sent the email and said, dear Mr. Dimon, I'm a Tufts alum like you. I'd like to come and work for this bank. So Jamie Dimon did not respond, but his secretary did. And she said, Matthew, thanks for your thing. Yes, Jamie remembers Tufts fondly, and I'll forward your resume to the HR department. That was the little hook right there was, hey, we went to the same school. Or hey, we know this person in common. or we're both passionate, or you know that this person is very active in this charity or this whatever nonprofit. Say, oh, I'm in something similar. So find that one-line hook to get the person to say, okay, we have at least something in common, or there's a reason to open the resume. So you don't want to make it too generic. You also don't want to totally customize it, but find that reason for them to say, and I do that with kids that went to the same business school that I went to. When they mention the business school, I'm like, okay, I'm going to open the resume out of loyalty to the alma mater. That's usually the hook, is school you went to, sports you played, somebody you know in common. That's the cover letter. And good, we still have 15 minutes. The job search campaign. So I consider job searching is not a one shot out there, send one resume and hope and pray that something happens. It's more spray and pray. Send a lot of them out there, right? And it's I call it like a full-blown marketing campaign. So you think of all that junk mail you get. We still get a lot of junk mail. They're sending out hundreds of thousands of those things to people. And not everybody's going to open it, not everybody's going to do something with it, but they don't need that big of a percentage of people to take out that coupon or fill out this thing or apply for that credit card for that campaign to be worthwhile. I think job searching is exactly the same. You need the statistics to work in your favor, and you need to send out a lot of things. And the good news is sending out email is free, as opposed to mailing physical mail. Sending out hundreds and hundreds of resumes costs you nothing. A little bit of time, but that's about the extent of what it costs you. I'll talk a little bit about the volume of resumes that I encourage you to put out there and kind of the statistics behind how does that lead to a job, right? And it'll feel frustrating at first, but you'll understand the math here shortly. But you really want to cast a very broad net, a very wide net to get your resume out there. If you're too picky and only send out one or two, I guarantee you will not get a job. It just doesn't work. You need to send out hundreds and hundreds of resumes for a few opportunities to come forward. You will get rejected. It's not a personal thing. People delete. People don't pay attention to the resumes. Don't take it like, ooh, my resume must be terrible and I'm a horrible person and I'm not skilled. No, it's not a reflection on you. Have the confidence that the right job will be presented to you at some point. God has a plan for you, but he also has a plan for you to be rejected 99% of the time, because that's part of what the job search is all about. So I'll give you some math. If you send out 100 resumes, and I'll kind of tell you at what pace you should be sending that out, 90 of them will either end up in spam or junk or get immediately deleted, just instantly, because people just don't have time, don't have the patience. So 90% of them are just gone. 10 of them actually get through. Somebody actually shows up in their inbox, not in the spam, and they're like, okay, I got this, this email with a resume on it. 5 of them will open. The other half will delete. The minute they get the resume in the inbox, like, oh, here's another person asking me for a job, delete. 5 of them will actually open the email, maybe read the cover letter. Maybe 3 of them will read the cover letter and maybe click open the resume. 2 of them might have a relevant job for you and say, come on in for an interview, let's get on a Zoom call. And 1 of them will actually offer you a job. A 1% hit rate in a marketing campaign is a good campaign. When people send out the hundreds of thousands of credit card offers and coupons, whatever, if they get 1% of the people that take action, they consider that a massive success. 99% of the rest is waste. This, I believe, is no different. Getting your resume out there, 1 in 100 is a pretty good hit rate. If you get one job by sending out 100 resumes, congratulations, you're well within the realm of statistical validity that I've witnessed personally. So what does this mean for what I think it means? I'll just go back here for a second. Is you should send out 20 to 25 resumes a day for 4 weeks in a row. That's 100 a week. It's 400 by the end of the month. With 400, statistically, you'll get 2 to 3 job offers. But you need to send out 20, 25 resumes a day, nonstop for a month. And you're gonna say, well, who do I send them to? Well, you go find out what are the companies you'd like to work for? Who are the people you went to school with? Who are the professors you had in school? What are the job openings on this website, including LinkedIn? Unsolicited, you go to a company's website and they have, here are all the jobs that are open. You go find out who's the person in HR, who's the recruiting manager. You need to go find those 20 to 25 names and emails every single day. That's part of the hard work. The resume is done, the cover letter's done. Finding the 20, 25 emails is where the real work gets done, and then you start blasting out every day 2025. And by the end of the month, you'll have 400, if it's a 5-week month, 500 resumes out there. The phone will ring. It won't ring the first 2 or 3 weeks, but eventually it will ring. Eventually your resume will end up in somebody's inbox. They'll say, I don't have a job, but I know somebody who does. Or I'll forward it to HR, and HR says, oh, actually, we're looking to recruit somebody. Or this person just resigned, or this person got fired and we have an opening. Statistically, if you send out 400 or 500 resumes, you'll get a few calls. And then you interview. So we'll talk about the interviews. But that's my encouragement. Don't go one off here, send out one resume a day, maybe. No, 20 to 25. And hold yourself accountable. If one day you only send out 15, boom, the gap, you have to follow up the next day and get them out there. Talking about interviewing, and I think I should be able to wrap this up. Rehearse. This is like, Broadway show, right? You're advertising, you're performing. And you can do it, with AI, you can do like, self-rehearsing, you can do it in front of somebody, you can just record yourself, but rehearse. Right? It's a performance that you need to be good at and expect certain questions and know how to answer concisely and precisely certain things. What's the 15-second, what I call elevator pitch? If you just have 15 seconds, how do you describe who you are, what you do, and why they should hire you? Don't have the 5-minute version, have the 15-second version. Say, I'm so-and-so, I went to such a school, I'm really good at this, and I'd love to work in your company because of that. Because you may be in the elevator with the CEO of the company, or you may get literally 15 seconds because the secretary said, okay, you can talk to him for 15 seconds. What's your hook? And have that well rehearsed. If you start off the interview, also have the 2-minute version, or 90 seconds is even better. Then you can elaborate a little bit more. Don't do the 5-minute, 10-minute thing where you monopolize the entire conversation. They will fall asleep, and it'll show you have no self-awareness. So be aware of how to pitch yourself in 15 seconds in less than 2 minutes. And time yourself, like literally do it in front of your iPhone, your computer, or in front of a friend, and time yourself. Can I tell my story in under 90 seconds? So record yourself also, because you will notice mannerisms, words you use. You'll be like, or you use the same word over and over again because you're nervous. So record yourself and catch yourself with certain tics. If you're scratching your ear or you're fixing your hair, don't do that. In an interview, if you're fixing your hair every 5 seconds, it's distracting, and you're fidgeting, and they're not paying attention to you. They're just noticing that strand of hair just keeps getting, well, I don't have that problem, but it's my success thanks to. Mine too. See, we have that in common. It's great. But record yourself, right? And just be aware of how you come across. Right? And then do an actual dress rehearsal. Like dress up in whatever and have your resume and get your friend or family member to drill you like they would an interview, to ask you tough questions. And see if you fumble, see if you can get that 15-second kickoff question thing done. Have them ask you a tough question. If you don't rehearse, you're going to show up, but first of all, you won't know what kinds of questions they're going to bring to you, and you can just chat GPT or Google and say, what are the top 10 questions in interviews, and have your family member interview you. And that could be a 15, 30-minute exercise. It's a little bit of role playing, but that could be a lot of fun. In terms of the interview itself, get there early, but not too early. You don't want to be late, right? So like in New York City, the subway is always a good excuse. Don't be late. But here, if you're driving to an interview, plan. Check out if Cerritos is closed because of police activity, which usually seems to be the issue that we get texted on all the time. Get there early enough, mainly because if it's like a hot day or you're nervous, you're probably sweaty. You want to cool off. You don't want to go in there and like dripping with sweat and your shirt's drenched. It's a bad look, right? Freshen up. Go to the bathroom, because you don't want to, in the middle of the interview, saying, time out, I got to go pee. No, right? Do that before. Check your teeth. Spinach, poppy seed, right? Check your, you don't have like a giant piece of lint or a piece of toilet paper stuck in your, just kind of, no, but you guys laugh, but this happens, right? And if somebody has a poppy seed thing right here all you do during the interview is you're checking out, right? So just clean up, right? Take a mint, right? Fresh breath. There's simple things, but trust me, in an interview, that somebody will just write you off because they're too distracted by whatever, right? Bring a hard copy of your resume just it shows you can give it to them, and then they have something to play with. They can write on. You have a copy for yourself, but it's also your own personal cheat sheet, right? You don't want to go completely empty-handed. You want to have your resume, your copy of it, and a pen, and you give them a copy as well. And then you have something to anchor yourself. And if you're nervous, you can always look back at your resume, right? If you lose your train of thought, it's like, oh, what am I supposed to tell them next? Oh, look at the resume. Oh yeah, let me talk about that. Look professional, obviously. I mean, don't go in with like ripped jeans, unless the company is, everyone wears ripped jeans. But kind of know your audience, right? Prepare yourself to present yourself properly. If they offer, if they say, do you want a drink? Say yes. Ask for water. Don't ask for, a bourbon or, but say yes, I'd love a water, because it gives you the opportunity, if you get nervous, your heart rate goes up, your mouth is all dry, take the water, open it, take a sip, gives you 5 seconds to break, and you reset. So say yes to the water, or coffee or whatever, but preferably water. But it allows you to slow things down. Take a pause in the middle of the interview. Bring either notes or have them written on your resume. You can have stuff scribbled on your resume, that's your cheat sheet. You're allowed to have, a little bit of a cheat sheet. You've done your homework on the company. You have some questions you want to ask them, or you anticipated they might ask you a question, here's how I'm going to answer it. You're allowed to have your own cheat sheet, right? And if you get nervous, come back to that. Here are the 3 things I need to tell about myself. So if you get lost in your thoughts or get nervous, you breathe, you look like, oh yeah, these 3 things. Let me repeat these 3 things that define kind of who I am and why you would want to talk to me. And references, even though you don't put references on request, have some people ready. When they do go down the path of offering you a job, they say, we'd like to talk to some references. Know who are those 3 people. A boss you've worked for before, a colleague you've worked with, and another boss, and then let them know out of courtesy ahead of time they're going to get a call. You don't want an inbound reference call to come and somebody says, oh, I didn't know this person was looking for a job, or I don't know what to say. You call your references ahead of time and coach them and say, I'm applying to this job. Here's what's important about this job. Please say the following things, and a reference will be delighted, as long as you give them the heads up. So I've got 1 more minute. I don't know if I can, you know what, I'll probably skip through some of these. Yeah, I'll wrap this up. That way the music team can come in. But I'm happy to spend time with you on job searching, resumes, cover letters, interviewing. I personally love interviewing. I think it's a lot of fun, both interviewing people, but being interviewed. If you get good at it, it's actually very enjoyable. It's actually a fun thing to pitch yourself and try and get the job, and just learn about companies and learn about people. You'll have interviews that go completely off the rails, total train wrecks. Good. You'll never do that one again. But I encourage you to interview, because here again, it's the repetitions. How many reps do you get pitching yourself, which is why you want as many interviews as possible. Never refuse an interview. If somebody says, would you want to come in for an interview? Even if you don't want the job, take it. It's a dress rehearsal. It's free. So take every interview, even if the job is not interesting, you're never going to take it, go in. Because you'll learn something. You'll learn something about yourself. You'll learn how to deal with a funky question. And maybe it is a job ultimately that you do want. So thank you, everybody, for your attention over the last 4 weeks. I'm at your disposal to talk about any of this. Everything's been recorded. The slides, I'll make sure they're available to any and all of you. But hopefully it was fruitful, useful, but it's a blessing for me to be able to share some of this with my brothers and sisters in Christ. So thank you for your attention.